Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. The Saint of War, Tensura x DxD, by Kischur Chapter 11. It has been a week since the exorcist has went to the Pendragon estate, and naturally because of their trespassing and destruction of property, they were house arrest for 3 days only. Originally it would only be a week, since the exorcist and the Pendragon estate are still allies after all, and with Alexander being the strongest exorcist in history, they simply couldn't punish him too severely. It only became as low as it did simply because both Seal and Byleth vouch for their nonsense and that they have delivered vital information to him, which has resulted in them being given such light sentences. While it was going at it, Seal was going about perfecting the weapons that he was currently creating as well, with him nearing its completed stage, with him predicting it would be complete in about a day or two. So right now, currently Seal was going to the royal family of Britain, which is also just a puppet family that the Pendragons created to effectively make the rest of the world think the legend of King Arthur is just a mere legend, and everything related to the supernatural is actually just fiction and the thoughts of people. Of course, to have such power in the country, periodically, the Pendragons does appear to elected officials of the country and show them the supernatural world, making them know of their presences and making them know who truly owned the country, with them being the descendants of King Arthur and his knights. It's because of this, despite no longer having such governmental control over the country, they still have immense control, especially since Britain is very familiar with legend of King Arthur and the sword from the stone itself, with them knowing faithfully the story, much like how priest and nuns knows of the Bible. So right now, with the company of some knights that is trained by the Pendragon, Byleth, who is the temporary maid of Seal Tempest, Morgan Pendragon following to make sure that the government supports Ciel's plans, and finally Alexander following along with the pretext that he is there to protect Seal of any danger. The moment such entourage walked in on the royal family of Britain, the guards, the servants and the royal family all simultaneously bowed down on their knees towards them. "We welcome you, House Pendragon, and the exorcist of the church." They all spoke in reverence to their presence. In truth, if they just gotten word that a high-ranking exorcist would be visiting them, they wouldn't have shown such hospitality to them, even when they are allied with them, since to them, they are only loyal to the House of Pendragon and would rather kill themselves for bowing to another. But since a member of the House of Pendragon was present, they decided to bow down, especially so since the beautiful blue-haired girl that was in front of them was the one that would strengthen the natural human army that they have from the potential war that would most likely happen in the future. With the most likely suspect being the Germans being the one who will start World War II, with it being either influenced by either Greeks or the Slavics to start said war, and grant them an excuse to start a war with heaven. At first, the royal family of Britain hated their alliance with said faction, since to them, because of heaven's negative relationship with the Greeks, they would be potentially caught up in their mess as their allies. But since they are under the Pendragon household, they couldn't truly voice said thoughts out. But now that they have the potential of actually acquiring weapons that could enhance their fighting power to be able to stand up against the armies of Germany, which are also being supported by an unknown faction, Pantheon, they gladly accepted the church's help, especially with them being sponsored by the Pendragon house. "Stand up, and let's continue our meeting elsewhere." Morgan spoke with authoritative tone in her words, completely conveying the status between her and the ones that was bowing towards her. "Right this way, my lady." With that, the king slowly stood up for a moment before bowing once again and led them to a private room so that they could talk behind the scenes, with said room being erected with various magic spells to ward off would-be eavesdroppers. With that, the group then sat down on the couches that was presented to them, with the king and his wife seating on the opposing side of Seal and Morgan's couch in where they sat, and behind them was Byleth and Alexander. And the ones that was outside of said room was the guards of the royal family and of Pendragon as well. With that, the king then looked at Seal and spoke with clear respect on his tone, on the national guest of his beloved nation. "You must be Lady Seal? Yes? Can you elaborate further on what you would be able to grant the soldiers of Britain, a weapon that could rival those of the Germans?" he asked, wanting to know about the said weapon that could potentially equal them to the Germans. With an unknown entity supporting the German nation, the nation was able to experience a military expansion never before seen in history, with said nation now boasting the strongest human military in the entire human world now. And so, fearing for war to happen, The royal family has also decided to go and try to seek out help with their own supernatural side, which is the Pendragon House and the Five Faction, but considering that none of them are so profound in the art of weapons making, that aren't magically enhanced, they didn't have much to rely on. But now, getting the chance of actually acquiring the chance to do so, and better yet, is said to be a friend and ally of the House of Pendragon, none of them truly wanted to go and make a dirty deal with the girl before them. Seal, hearing the mistaken gender, didn't said anything about it, already gotten used to it, since it has become a common sight for him to be mistaken for a girl by some, which was something that he has given up on trying to correct them now, with how often it has become an occurrence. Morgan and Alexander, hearing the mistaken gender, couldn't help but snort in amusement at the mistaken gender as well, truly finding his predicament hilarious, with the only who responded negatively being Byleth herself, who gave the king a glare, but not to the point of it being seen by a third party though. The weapon that you speak of is something that I call the M4. With that, Seal then used his storage ring, causing said weapon to be seen by the public for the first time, causing the king to marvel at the weapon before him. Of course, I shall not grant it for free as well. Hearing Ciel's words, the king then looked towards Seal. Of course, you still the money and resource to create such a weapon, yes? To this Seal nodded. That's right, I would rather sell the weapons to Britain with a discount, and in turn, Britain shall grant a special privilege for 5 years without taxes. Seal proposed his idea to the king, who only needed to nod at the words of the young one before him. In truth, just hearing that this was given to them by the House of Pendragon was enough to cause them to accept whatever Seal would propose to them, and seeing that she only wanted to have 5 years without paying taxes is already a bonus for them. I shall accept, and send word to all officials of this new arrangement. By the way, what would be the name of this company of yours? Tempest. It shall my last name of Tempest. Well, that was easy, Alexander noted, upon thinking back to his experience with the royal family of Britain. I feel like we were far too overboard, with me and Morgan going in that meeting. He voiced his feelings about the deal that was created so easily. To this, Morgan only shrugged her shoulders, like she has already expected this outcome. What do you expect? With the House of Pendragon supporting Seal, and with some unknown third party clearly helping out Germany militaristically, it was bound to happen that they would accept without any form of resistance. Morgan gave her 2 cents about the situation that they just experienced just now. Morgan's right. Seal gave his own word in as well, because of the tensions right now is continuously rising. It wouldn't be long now before war happens. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in about 2 or 3 years from now as well. War was coming, and there was no way to stop it, and the only thing that they could do is to prepare and get ready for war. A thought that all of them agreed with as well, but for now, we must ready ourselves, especially with the Celtic readying for the war to conquer entire British Isles. Byleth said as well, causing those in the Pendragon House to cringe a little at that strong implication. It is by no means a secret that the Celts hates the British people. As for the reason for that hate is because of the past war that the two groups have in the past, in where the Celtic pantheon and the Kingdom of Camelot, with the aid of the Five Faction, was able to repel and defeat the Celtic army that marched their way to British soil. It was the battle for the ages, with King Arthur Pendragon, having achieved Saint Stage and history's strongest holy sword and item by his side, was able to fight off and defeat even the Godslayer Scathach. It was a battle between the two human powerhouses that shook the entire continent of Europe in their battle, and it was a battle that shone just how powerful a human could become as well if armed with the right equipments and tools by his side. And right now, King Arthur has died, leaving the only powerhouse in the British Isles being both Scathach and Lugh, which are 2 of the strongest members of the Celtic pantheon. But despite that though, Seal was sure that Scathach wouldn't enter the fray if there weren't any Saint Stage humans in the war, only wanting to fight worthy opponents and not opponents that are weaker and less skilled than her. Which meant only Lugh would truly fight, and out of the 2, Seal would rather fight Lugh rather than Scathach, for the simple fact that Lugh would have a weakness which is godslaying weapons and poison, while Scathach would have none at all, only being defeated through sheer warrior's capabilities and strength. If the Pendragons wants to survive, you all need to train, you, Byleth and Artoria. Out of the 3, Byleth is by far the most talented. But to add more chances for victory, the Excalibur shards shall be returned back to the Pendragon household. Seal declared to the ones near him, causing them to be surprised by his words. Giving them back the Excalibur shards, Alexander couldn't help but ask his superior, wanting to know if what he said is for real, and seeing that he isn't saying anything, he couldn't help but sigh in frustration and mess up his own hair. Oh, how the higher-ups would be happy about this, he said sarcastically, which Seal didn't realize. Oh, how nice of them, he said in such a monotone voice that none of them actually realized that he thought that the higher-ups would actually happily give them away. But still though, there would be some old farts that would vehemently reject such a notion. Since to them, losing more and more combat power and resource would be something that no one would like, especially with how eager the Egyptians and Greeks are in actually invading heaven's territory, and not to mention how eager the devils and fallen angels actually are in having revenge for the previous supernatural world war. Alexander gave his thoughts of actually giving the Excalibur shards to the Pendragons. And to be honest, he doesn't really care about the Excalibur shards, since sure they are strong, but they aren't strong enough to also enhance his own way of fighting as well. Sure there are powerful swords, with them being unique to legendary grade weapon, but none of them actually fit his way of fighting at all. He fights with knives and bayonets, so to him having a sword would just be an inconvenience, and there's also the fact that the Archangels has also started to think of actually granting the Excalibur shards to Seal as well, viewing him as being worthy in actually wielding said sword as well. But now that he expressed interest in actually returning the broken swords back to the Pendragons, one could only assume that what they plan to do so as well, since after all, despite no one acknowledging it, Gabriel have a tight leash around the Archangels and most of the priest and exorcist necks, with her having the most influence and control over heaven, despite Michael being the leader of the faction. If she were to hear Ciel's interest in granting the Pendragon households the Excalibur shards, she would mostly just accept it, and gave them away, with her mostly being supported by many of the female angels and exorcist, who has very much taken a liking to him. Morgan and the others on the other hand, was taken aback by Ciel's decision of giving them the Excalibur shards, since after all, it's not truly a secret that the Pendragon household does have a strong interest of acquiring back the shards to restore their honor. It was the very reason why they even went on to have an alliance with heaven in the first place, to hopefully be able to convince the Archangels to grant them special rights to the Excalibur shards, but now that they have the chance of actually acquiring it with the help of Ciel, the members couldn't help but smile happily at such occasion. It seems that the esteemed goal of the family would be completed far more quickly than expected, Morgan thought while looking to the side to look at Ciel for a moment, before looking back ahead. Now, it seems that we are only left with the legendary staff of Morgan left to acquire. She thought quite happy of the result that her father happily accepted such a man before her. In the offices of the Pendragon household, Zelrech Pendragon was currently in the works, going over his paperwork that more so consist of military expenditure and training, with his wife taking more care about the financial and government side of the family itself. Normally, he would be the one to take of such manner himself, but since the tension in the supernatural world is constantly rising and the constant rumors of war going to happen in a few years, Zelrech decided to divide his work into himself and to his wife, who agreed to the decision right away. With him taking more of the military side and her with the government side of the work, it was an arrangement that suited them greatly, since she was always been raised to be the next queen and head mistress of the Pendragon house, so for her who has more so focused on books and governing a whole faction, to her it just came easy for her to accept the role that she was placed into. And as for Zelrech, he has always been a military person, with him even working for the church for a short time, before striking on his own as a Pendragon, and risen his strength to the point of nearing the end of the enlightened stage of humanity itself, with skills in the sword that would be able to qualify him as a swordmaster. And so right now, he was now out of his work to review the training schedule of the upcoming knights in training, but when he was about to continue reading a knock was heard, causing him to stop and looked at the door. "Who is it?" "It's me, father." "Ah, Artoria, you can come in." When hearing the familiar voice, Zelrech immediately opened, causing the figure of Artoria to enter the room, with her armor on and sword on her left hip. It was a common sight to behold to anyone in the house of Pendragon, with her inspiring to be the strongest knight in the house. "What's bring you here, Artoria?" he asked, wanting to know what she wants from him, since she herself hasn't have anything she ever wanted from, with the sole exception of training or food itself. And it has also become common for him to hear one or the either as well. Artoria hearing this, could only looked up and asked. "I want to accompany Ciel on his journey." "Huh, wait, what?" Quote. Zelrech shouted in shock at what he just heard from his precious daughter's mouth. It was like he just heard that his own brother has died pathetically. "Why?" he asked, shocked and immensely saddened by the desire of his lovely daughter leaving him be for some boy that just appeared. It seems that he would be going around some countries to experience the world itself, and since I do plan on doing it myself, to become a better leader of House Pendragon, I figure it would be going for me to learn of the world before the war itself. Artoria gave her reasoning, a reasoning that Zelrech couldn't say anything about as well. But I think it would be safer to do so in the future instead. Like for example, after the war's end, you may see the world from there, Zelrech advised, and in truth, he is right as well. With the tension of war happening in the supernatural world, no one would be surprised if the princess and heir of the Pendragon house would be kidnapped and taken hostage to acquire some leverage from the Pendragons. The only reason why Seal was able to move so freely without others planning on harming or kidnapping him, was simply because he is in the territory of allied factions' pantheon, with places that which would make it almost impossible for anyone to kidnap him. And if there was a fool that could do so, they would still need to be at least a god-class combatant to do it without making any noise at all, or to completely overpower Seal, who by this point has reached the saint stage of power, and add in his own combat skills as well. He was already well equipped to take on multiple high-class gods on his own. And add in the fact that Gibril was always with him, who is also a master of summoning magic. With her skills, she could easily summon the archangels to help Seal in battle as well, especially Gabriel, who viewed him as her own son. Because of this fact, no one has tried to do anything, but that couldn't be said for his next destination though, which is the Americas, the land where gods fell, a land free from the influences of the gods and of mysticism. It was essentially free territory to mess around with, or in this case, have the chance to confront Seal and Gibril in their travels, and that's what truly worried Zelrech, who didn't want his own precious daughter to leave with him, since the chance of meeting a high-class opponent is going to become high to the point it would be guaranteed. That might be true. Artoria considered it as well. It was a viable option, with it being more safer, but there was another reason for her wanting to travel with Seal though. But from what I learned from Seal so far is something that surpassed anything that the Pendragon house has taught me anything. I want to continue my sword tutelage with him, so that I could become strong enough to be able to defend the pride and honor of House Pendragon. And that Morgan is planning on leaving the house to follow Seal as well. Quote. Single quote. Single quote. Zelrech was shocked to the point that he didn't registered anything, or thought of anything, he just stood there, completely and utterly motionless. It was to the point that one could easily mistake him for a statue. It was to the point that Artoria was nervous for a moment, and even thought her father has died, but vanished the thought when she still feeling that his own mana was still as high as it has always been. So she didn't bother to say anything right now, and just continued to wait. And after 10 minutes of waiting, she just decided to leave and contact her mother to check up on father. Oh dear, it seems that he is having one of his episodes again, she commented, with an almost amused look on her eyes, but was still very much annoyed as well. Episodes? Artoria asked, curious about what she just heard from her precious mother, who only nodded at her. That's right, his episodes are more so about beating the shit. Mother. Language. Quote. Out of the person that either got your or your sister's attention, she continued, not minding her own daughter's words, while also placing Zelrech in a dream so that he would still be asleep for a few more minutes so that they could talk. Dear, you said that you want to follow Seal on his journey, yes? What is it about truly? She asked, wanting to reach a conclusion from her words, to which Artoria saw and answered. I want to become strong. Strong enough that Byleth wouldn't be the only one recognized as a powerhouse of the Pendragon household. I want to reach the highest of peaks of power, and to do that, I need to be with the strongest human child in the world to reach said goal. Mom, I want to become strong enough to be able to carry the Pendragon household's pride and honor, and make a legacy that even dwarfs our ancestor. That was her wish above all else, to acquire a legacy for herself that surpassed her own ancestor to the point that if people think of the Pendragon house, they wouldn't think of Arthur Pendragon, but of her. Artoria Pendragon. It was a selfish goals, but it was still her goals after all, a goal that she wants to reach by all means, and if it means to go with Seal, then she would gladly take it for herself, and add in the fact that Morgan would be leaving as well to continue her tutelage with Gibril, it caused her to desire to join his group to not be outshined by Morgan. Sure, She would accept it for Byleth, who held Lancelot's blood inside her, but what she wouldn't accept Morgan surpassing her, she would surpass her. She was sure that was also something that Morgan thought of as well, it's for that reason she wants to go along with his group. Eve, seeing her daughter's expression, couldn't help but giggle at her face. I see. It seems that I would have a son-in-law soon in the future. Well, it is Seal, then I don't really mind. Don't know about this old fool though, she thought, before eyeing her unconscious husband. Leave now. Quote. I said leave now. If you take a day or longer, your father would stop your advancement. Say this to Lord Seal as well. Go and get my daughters and leave Britain and go to your next destination. Hurry. Rewrite. Hearing her mother's insistent words, Artoria couldn't help but just agree and just leave the room, quickly going to her room to acquire her clothes and personal items to ready herself for her journey with Seal. After that she then left the mansion to quickly look for Seal.